Welcome to the Dairy Farmers Digest, a podcast dedicated to all things dairy farming. Each episode, we will talk to industry leaders who share their insights and experiences into the dairy business. I'm your host, Keith Schweitzer, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the DFD. I'm your host, Keith Schweitzer. I'm really intrigued and excited to have Dr. Shari Van de Pol on this morning from Cattleytics. She was just blowing my mind with some AI stuff here when we're looking at calculating pad sizing for some corn silage. And why don't you say hi, Shari, and maybe introduce your company and kind of your path to get to where you are today? Because I know it's very interesting. It's not too often I have a veterinarian and a computer engineer on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm really excited to be talking to you this morning because this is one of my favorite topics to talk about, of course. Yeah, the path to get here definitely worked in data mining, worked in engineering for about 10 years before I went to vet school. And really the fun that we have here is combining, cutting edge tech with, age-old problems. And it really we take a very people first approach at the company. I've said this before, but AI, if it's working well, is doing the things that you don't want to do. It's doing the things that are, maybe frustrating or time consuming to do, but it doesn't take the people out of this. It's a tool that we can use and ideally use it in the best way possible. So it's a great topic. And Cattleytics is a company that provides technical solutions, everything from staffing solutions, time clocks, staff scheduling, a place to put all your protocols on a dairy, as well as it is a digital twin of a dairy farm. So all the things that exist on a dairy exist in our system. So it's a very visual platform to visualize your cows and their production, taking data from lots of different systems, things like daily milk weights or any of the treatment data, putting that in one place. And then we also do deep analytics. So that's things like machine learning, understanding the science behind what's going on in order to be able to answer the questions that are so time consuming that unless you want to become a computer engineer yourself, we sort of take that off the table. So that's a bit about me and a bit about the company Cattleytics.
Well, I know you gave us a presentation kind of introducing the company to us. Oh, when was that? Back in August, maybe. And
Mhm.
I know for the last, I don't know, year or two, you've been hearing more and more rumblings about AI, and it's one of those things. It's like, how can we incorporate this tool and put it in our toolbox so that we can, properly utilize it? Because I think it's like anything else. Like if you're not putting good information in, you're not going to get good information out. And I guess it's just how do you figure out how to put the best information in to get an outcome, right? So.
Yeah, and so I've done talks on AI different places, and one of the first things I do is just describe what it is, and then give a few examples because I think sometimes, I use the metaphor of a car. You don't have to know exactly how a car operates, but having an idea where the brakes are and where the engine sits, it allows you to talk a little bit more intelligently about the concept. And so that's part of my goal too, is to, when we talk about AI, there's things from machine learning, large language models, computer vision, robotics, and then expert systems. Those tend to be the big categories in the world of AI. And once you can sort of, categorize what you're seeing, and there's of course overlap between those groups, I think it's just easier to better engage. This is a tech that is going to become, a year ago, a lot of people didn't know what it is. And
No, I
today,
know it's
very
it's
few
crazy.
people don't use it in some way.
Almost using it daily now
Yeah.
in some kind of aspects, right? Like it might be in my personal life, might be in my professional life, but I'm using it and actually going to it, maybe Google something and then you go to jump over into Chat GPT or use Gemini, something like that to figure out what's up with it, right? And it's more out of curiosity on my end.
Well, that sort of explains why you're doing what you're doing as somebody who likes to know what's going on. And I think a lot of people listening to this podcast are that type of person. They want to stay current. They want to know how to use the latest tools. And part of our success in whatever field we're in is just literally, making sure that you're staying current, you're connecting yourself with people who are continuously improving themselves and how they do their work. And yeah, it's the example you were giving where you were using AI to see how good can you be at some of these calculations.
Hmm.
It's interesting, but you can get very different results.
I know, and it took you to come in and kind of straighten me around a little bit on how to figure out how to properly prompt it, right? Like you
I think
can't, like I find like the vaguer the question, the more variation you get in the outcome.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple aspects of that too. When when you kind of understand how the mechanisms work, then you can better use them. So when you're using these models, like large language models, they're vastly predictive. So they're trying to predict the most common, it goes from predicting the next word you're going to write to predicting the answer or the most likely answer. But the most likely answer isn't necessarily the most correct answer. In
Hmm.
some areas, it is the most correct answer. But if you ask everybody what their favorite food is, you could predict something. It might not be the best food, or it might not be what you want to eat. So
Yeah.
when we're talking about that prediction elements of it, that's where it's really helpful to say in the top nutrition voices, you know, if or use, in the words of such and such, farming specialist or and when you start to do that, then it starts to filter that down to not just be the most common answer, but the most correct answer. Who are the people that you would ask for this advice? And can you get that answer in their voice? So that's a really key part to some of those prompting exercises.
So when these large language models are working, like where are they pulling their information from?
So a lot of it is any digital information they have access to, and depending on the models that you're using, some of those could be they could only go up to a certain date, so you could potentially not be getting the latest information. But it's basically any digital information that's available. And so a lot of them now promise not to learn off your information if you have a setup like that. But I mean, the internet has so much on it. But if it's not digitally available, of course, it doesn't have that information to learn.
Yeah, so it's like it'll use your search engines. Like, will it use your own personal information? Like, or do you have to say, "Dear ChatGPT, don't
Mhm.
look into my database or into my
Well,
personal computer"?
I mean, that's definitely a concern for a lot of people and a lot of companies. And then that's where those layers of safeties are added on top of basic large language model engines. Because a lot of us don't necessarily, it's a two-sided thing. We want to learn from everybody else, but we don't want it to learn from ours, right?
Yeah,
It's like, oh, well, I
exactly.
don't,
Yeah.
right? And
I want
so
to rob Peter, but I don't want to pay Paul.
a little bit, right? And and so that's where a lot of those have protection. I mean, despite the fact that they say that, yes, we don't learn from those things, a temporary chat is truly temporary. You do have to think that anytime you put data on the internet, I mean, with all the safeguards possible, things still get stolen. Things still go the wrong way. So, I mean, I think Sam Altman at one point said, don't I wouldn't trust my own company, ChatGPT. I wouldn't trust any data you put into it, despite the fact that, they give you all these assurances to say that they're not learning off your data. So, yeah, I think being careful. But what is the cost of that? Because if you're so careful you don't use anything, is your data truly that, sensitive or that important? So
Yeah.
I think you have to really, anything you put out there has the possibility of being taken. I mean, whether it's on a Google Drive and something gets hacked or, so that so weighing that out is something that I think each organization, each person has to say, what is the good we're getting this, and what is the potential cost?
Hmm. Like, are there any, I guess, blind spots or negatives that while using something like this that we should be looking out for, or things that we can do to kind of help protect some of this information?
I mean, protecting the information, you can also give it, close information as opposed to
Mhm.
giving it the real one. Saying, okay, I don't want to give you my real financial numbers. I'm going to give you fake financial numbers, but then or I'm not going to put my name in there, but I'll put something else. So
Yeah.
you can sort of slightly encode what you're putting out there so that you can't follow the dots back, but then it's easy for you to use. But I think one other blind spot that I've noticed isn't actually a blind spot of data being left or lost. It's actually the fact that there's some AI models that allow you to do things today that you won't be able to do in the future. So the very first versions of ChatGPT let you do almost anything. And that is good and bad.
Mhm.
But as there's more and more protections and more companies are wanting to kind of shut that down because that could be affecting their business, they're getting more and more pressure to limit what some of these models can do. So I think it's almost the opposite, where some of the things the models can do today, you won't be able to do that in the future. So people are finding that even, and again, this gets into ethical considerations. If you say, make me an image that's looks like it came out of a Pixar film. You used to be able to do that
Yeah.
a year ago, and I know that because we took our daughter's drawing and made it into a Pixar image. You can't do that today. You go in and it says, sorry, I can't. So, in fact, it's always when tech comes out at first, it's a really good time to like try it out and do things because it might become more expensive, more difficult, and different companies might have a very vested interest in decreasing what you can do with that tech.
Well, I know I tried to, we were sitting around the campfire camping one night, and I was kind of joking with my wife about all the signs in the trailer park about slowing down. So I wrote the lyrics to a song using ChatGPT, but it wouldn't let me put music to it.
Yeah, but that's something that yeah, it's interesting because it does become a bit of I think when it's working well, it becomes a leveler for people
Hmm.
that have, it used to be that only if you had the the finances and the connections and that could you do this thing. And now the amount of things you can do as an individual, it's actually really incredible. And it's in some ways a great leveler, but that doesn't necessarily work well to everybody's interest.
Yeah. Where's it going? Like in 5 years, what are we going to be talking about? Like, because it seems like in the last year or so, like some of the early adopters, I would say, have kind of started using it more and more, and it's getting more common. But like with any technology, the more that it's out there, the quicker that it's gonna be adopted, and it's gonna learn quicker. And there's a lot of
Mhm.
things like, what, like, is the sky the limit on this, or?
Yeah, well, I think the specialization element of it as well, where right now it's this sort of general thing. And then the question is, if we think about feed and nutrition,
Mhm.
right now you can put details into Chat GPT and get a pretty good answer. But, each company is going to be saying, "Oh, can we make our own version of this? Can we make this better?" So they're all going to be trying to make a better version of that. And how do they do that? Well, they're going to add proprietary data. They're going to add connections to specialists. They're going to add that element of, you know, the large language models end up being the triage that connects you with the experts. Um, so a lot of these things are taking that model and everybody thinking, okay, well, how do I use it for this and that and that? So you're going to have all of these different flavors of this, but then there starts to be a backlash against that because you just have too many apps, you have too many things, it becomes too fragmented. So figuring out that balance is going to be key. And for a lot of people in the industry, they're going to ask themselves, okay, well, can I make my own large language model tied to this? And the question is, how do you make your model not just a little better? Because if it's just a little better, I'll just use ChatGPT. Because as well, you can't necessarily charge for that. How do I make it so much better that I can actually build a business on top of that? And that's the tricky part that a lot of companies are struggling with right now.
Well, I'm just more worried about my job.
Oh, your job. I,
Well, no, and it's one of those things. Like I say that a little bit jokingly, but it's true. Like there
Mhm.
is a lot of, I guess, rhetoric out there that it's going to replace a lot of jobs going forward,
Yeah.
where it's a lot of the simple tasks that I'll use an analogy like self-checkouts. 10 years ago, we never seen a self-checkout around, and now everywhere has them. Like is AI on the same path where a lot of these kind of more regimented jobs are going to be replaced? I think it maybe is a little bit harder in agriculture because we're
Mhm.
dealing, like, you actually have to do mechanical or physical labor. But
Right.
is there lots of other, data analysis or picking a mating program for a farm or doing like from a veterinary thing, like laying out a offsetting protocol that, a producer, somebody's just going to go in to their chat GPT, put some information in and get something back out.
Yeah, I think a lot of the jobs that might not be as necessary going forward are often jobs that people don't necessarily like to do full time. It's that sort of busy work kind of, you take this model and you just apply it type work. And so, yes, I think it will automate some of those elements of it. But then what it's going to do is it's going to make those people that can really think through problems, can meet with individuals, talk through it, point the tech that is being used to the right problems, make a plan, communicate that, create that human to human experience. Those people are going to fly, I think, because they'll have all the tech to support them and they'll be able to go so much further and so much faster. So hopefully, if I think if this is working well, this takes away those jobs that are kind of busy work anyways,
Hmm.
don't require creative thinking. On the creative thinking front, I mean, I asked Chat to make a diagram for me recently, and it's, oh my goodness, like if you're doing any complex graphic design with layouts, you still have a job, let me tell you. Um, but I mean those other elements of it, yeah, knowledge used to be a barrier to a lot of people.
Hmm.
Whether it was, knowledge of how to calculate something, that was a barrier. And that barrier is going away. It used to be the fact that even access to books and information on the internet, like 25 years ago, when you were traveling around, it was a very different experience, than it is today. There's no knowledge barriers. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there's not a need for somebody to guide you through a process, somebody who has
Hmm.
experience, expertise. I think those people will just be better enabled.
Yeah, it's kind of like going back from when I was a kid. We had maps, like paper maps or book maps that we had to follow. Now I just punch it in as ways. It's like you don't need a co-pilot anymore.
Yeah, and I mean, did that did that take away some of your experience in map reading or some of your skills at map reading? Yeah, you're probably not as good reading maps today as you were.
No,
Is that a loss for us?
I
I
wouldn't
think
think
most of us
so,
would say the convenience is better.
Yeah, but the map wouldn't tell you if there was a road that was closed or an accident ahead or, whatever, where Waze is a pretty easy thing to put in, type where you're going, and it tells you the traffic on the way as long as people are inputting information, right? So,
Yeah, and I think when we talk about things like, in the programming world, there is a concern that junior programmers, like the senior programmers, will have very good job security, but junior programmers will have a harder time because when you're just learning something, are you better than AI at that point? And then
yeah,
how do you get from being junior to senior if something is so so it's more so those entry level jobs. Those are the ones that are a little bit more difficult, and we have to believe that there's, a positive path to becoming more senior, or for those individuals, they use AI to become more senior faster. People with experience, those are the skills that AI will just better enable. It's more the people coming in entry level with limited experience that have it's a steeper road to climb.
Yeah, like when I look at my career, I look at a lot of times we're a conduit between, what's being studied at universities, like higher end research, and how do we adapt that to a farm level. And I feel like myself, that's changed a little bit, where now we're maybe fine tuning that a little bit more using AI, where, if I've got a question or something like that, or I can type it in and then I can start reading through the answer. Then I can figure out, wow, this isn't quite right. Like I have to kind of hone in my question a little bit and wade
Mm.
through that stuff. So I still think there's a lot of, like you said, there's an opportunity for people that have like the real life experience versus what the AI might be telling us, where we can differentiate from what might work on a farm versus what might not work on a farm, right?
And then I think perhaps tied into that, we have to ask ourselves, do we believe there's more efficient ways to learn and less efficient ways to learn? Like, do you think that there's subject matter or learning a new language or learning that will get you to that point faster, or is it just the path you take? And I think if you believe that there are faster ways to learn, then, and it's not just the amount of hours you put into something, but the amount of hours you put into something where you're able to correct yourself and redirect and test. I think that's where AI can help with that learning efficiency. And if people are looking at becoming better and better at their craft, going in and even prompting it to say, hey, what do you think the opportunities are for me? What do you think I could better up my skills? It's pretty good at actually becoming suggestive and allowing you to have that access to information to quickly better yourself. So I think a lot of it then puts the both the onus and the opportunity on the person who wants to up their game and be at the top of their field.
Yeah, I used it a while ago. I had to do a presentation to a group of producers that were running short of forage. So I went through and I did the presentation and I did up the PowerPoint and stuff like that. And then at the end, I was like, I should ask ChatGPT what it thinks. So I did. And it had the stuff that I had listed already. And then it added a couple more things in there. I'm like, oh, I completely forgot about that.
But
Those are
it
some
takes
good ideas.
Yeah, but it takes you as the expert then to filter through that and say,
Yeah.
yeah, that makes sense. Ah, that one doesn't. And I
Yeah.
think sometimes people, because it's a slightly threatening concept, it's a really fun thing to point out when it's wrong. And it's like, well, yes, it's new. It's
Yeah.
if it's not helping you, it's not helping you. But I think for a lot of people, it can bring up suggestions you forgot. It can take data from a lot of different areas, but the prompting element of it, putting in what type of voice you want it to speak in, being really specific about your goals, pointing it to places that you want it to take the information from, and then asking it for references so you can go back and check and see the validity of it. There's ways of doing that, and you can even set up in your account settings the type of information you want. So it learns from you as in it understands what you're looking for in a chat. The other element when we were talking about being careful is that it actually will filter back to the data to you um, based on who it thinks you are and what it thinks you want to see. So I was on a panel in British Columbia last week, and somebody who was she was doing a lot on AI and cattle, and she was doing a test to see, okay, send me images of modern day dairy farms. And all the farms that it was showing her, the cows were out on pasture. They had horns. There was a red barn in the background. They were very picturesque images, but they weren't tied to modern day farms. And she was wondering, why is this? Are there not images on the internet showing like recent pictures of farms? And then she found that there was actually this element where all of those images were brought back. The most common modern day farms often tend to be freestyle barns, but it was actually then filtering all those out and believing that she wanted to see pretty cows with horns on grass.
So like our advertising.
Yeah, so just being cognizant of the fact that it could be filtering out elements of that you maybe have to, say, yeah, no, I want the really most common images of the last 5 years as opposed to something you think I want to see.
Yeah.
And so And so understanding those elements of it can help you to get the answers that you want.
From a producer side, like what are some of the like barriers to adoption of some of these technologies? Is it just like everything else? Like some farmers are producers will be, they want to be on the cutting edge, and other producers are more take a wait and see approach, or
Yeah, I think some people take it as a little bit of a badge of honor that they don't embrace tech. They're like, we all know the people that have, we all know and love the people that still have flip phones or, the like. And and I think I can appreciate where that's coming from because a lot of people find that tech is no replacement for human connection. And sometimes when people go so hard into tech and stop actually stepping out and seeing what's right in front of them and experiencing it and using their senses and being, creatively smart about the situation, that will always win. But I think if you can sort of mentally get over that hurdle and say, yes, I agree that's most important, but understanding how to, do a simple prompt. So I'd say there's lots of different large language models out there, but that's an easy way to get into AI. So open up, even just knowing how to do that, going into a browser, putting chatgpt.com in there and then asking a question. And I think when you get the first answer back, if it's not a good answer, some people say, I'm done.
yeah,
But what you can do is you can ask it yourself and say, can you write me a prompt? That would be a really good prompt about this. And I sometimes do that. I say, write me a prompt. It'll write me a paragraph wide prompt about some nutrition question. And then I'm like, great. And then I copy and paste the prompt. Sometimes when I say use the prompt, it doesn't do it as well as when I copy and paste the prompt. And then it'll say, in the voice of such and such top nutritionists and blah, 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 blah. Right. So I think
yeah,
I iterating through it, just getting on there and doing one simple thing to start. And then if you don't get the answer you want, say, can you make this better? Can you give me suggestions to make this better? The type of questions that you might call me up and ask, just literally ask that question next. Um, and I think that exploratory process usually gets people seeing at least what it can do. Um, and yeah, you can find errors, but I hope you do, because then you're looking through it through a really
well, you're
skeptical,
learning, right?
which you have to do.
Yeah, I think it's going to make people more skeptical.
It is tough. It is, I think the image generation right now, like people, I mean, I don't know if much of this audience is on things like TikTok, but the number of things out there, the percentage of video content out there that isn't real is not only kind of frightening, but it also actually like you stop believing almost anything and it really waters down that experience. So yeah, it's tough, but I mean, it is really it is really interesting if you do want to generate images for a video or you do want to demonstrate something tied to nutrition and you want to actually create a small animation, you can now do that in seconds. Something that
Hmm.
would have taken a whole team to do. And so like Google Gemini, they have VO, which is their video engine, and you can create an 8-second video that looks incredible. um, you just give it an image and say, okay, now animate the Wallenstein's logo, right?
Yeah.
And it'll create a great logo animation. So very powerful. Um, I'd say also, the podcast generation, you can now generate podcasts that are really engaging as a great way of learning a new topic. We do that at Catalytics. So we'll take dairy topics and make it a double host, engaging podcast talking about cow health, which is much easier to kind of listen to as you're doing something else than a long document read. So, there's a lot of benefits, but then when so much of it is out there, you do become the skeptic all the time. Is this real? Is this not?
It's hard to differentiate anymore. Like, there's a lot of stuff is like, holy, that's crazy. Then I think I'll take a step back and make, wait a second, this isn't real.
Is that old woman actually carrying a full-size bear on her shoulder? Yeah, I don't know.
It's
Yeah.
funny you mentioned one because I was like on TikTok when I was watching the baseball game last night, and I seen this one, and it was this bear attacking a dog, and the woman went and hit the bear in the head with a shovel, and the bear runs off. And I'm like, oh, that's crazy. But then I get thinking, there's no blood. Like that bear isn't like would kill that dog in one quick bite, and then the bear ran off behind the house but didn't run away. It just went behind the
Mhm.
house and was pointed the other way. I'm like, and then I seen another one. I don't know why I had bears in my algorithm last night, but they were on a four-wheeler in Alaska, and these two cubs
Right.
come by a person, and then the sow bear comes by, and I'm like, wait a second, she would be bluff charging or she would be doing something like she would. There's no way that she would let her cubs get that close to a four-wheeler, like.
Right,
But it
right.
looks so
So
real.
real. So real. And so even with with the images, like the things to question are that when AI is doing images, they tend to do little bit. And so you'll see the image itself will look really good, but if it's a person, you'll notice the person's hair is a little different the next time. Or
Yeah,
you'll notice something appears that wasn't there. Or like, and so we're not so used to looking for AI blips. But once you start to look for it, we're going to get the same skills as you get, doing a Google search. When you do a search, you see the links and you're like, this link looks like clickbait, right? We know that. We're starting to filter that out. Now in the AI world, we have to recalibrate our brains to be able to filter out, is this real? Is this not? And I mean, it's a wild, world out there in the AI world. Ideally, it makes us value the real all the more.
yeah. And I wonder too, like from a producer side of things, like, can you do a 1 minute video on proper milking procedure?
Yeah.
Proper, do a little video on how to check your dry matters of your forages, how to like just simple mundane things that are done by people that maybe aren't speaking the same language as you. And okay, I want this milking procedure in Spanish, in French, in German, in whatever language, Russian. Like it's just a few clicks of the taps of the keyboard, and you you've generated this SOP, right?
And that's actually what we have in the Catalytics application is the ability to take a protocol and then have it auto-generated not only in Spanish, but then connect to a Spanish multiple choice test and a Spanish podcast talking about the topic, and then you can connect images. Because, again, when tech comes out, it can be used for good things, it can be used for bad things. How do we harness it to really take out some of those pain points? And when we think of things like labor shortages, especially in rural areas, you know, it's something like, I might get the stat wrong, but it's something like a 70% chance, like greater, if your people are not being onboarded well, if they have a poor onboarding experience, 70% greater chance that they will leave and you'll have that turnover. That's incredibly expensive. You can lose some really good workers. So could you use AI for those things that, as a smaller operator, hey, I can't put a fancy HR program together where everybody comes in and sees how we do things. But could I use AI to do that? And so we're creating just the framework to allow people to set up that onboarding experience that they'd love their people to have, but don't really have the time to put it together. And so then it allows them to have everything in one spot. All the workers, if they're using phones, they can access it on their phones in the language they want. And if not, it's also on a website version of that. So they have a one-stop shop to know when they show up, what to do, how to do it. But I think that's, as a company, we're really thinking through those pain points. The number of farmers that say, I'm great with cows, I'm not so great with people. How do we smooth out those things so that this isn't true increased quality of life versus just another gimmicky tech thing?
Well, it's a good point about the onboarding because I see it from companies and from farms and things like that. Like there isn't, and it's something in my past life we actually had meetings about because like how do we properly onboard somebody though so they get a good look at company culture, right? Which is really important, I think, from a retention thing because yeah, like you said, labor, it doesn't matter where you go, Southwestern Ontario, the United States, Australia, Europe, labor is the number one issue in agriculture, in my opinion. So, how do we maybe use something like this to help facilitate a better outcome?
Right. And I think that's exactly those elements of it, putting yourself in the person's place who just shows up at a dairy. even if they have great experience, you could do something very different. You could have a
Hmm.
very different way of doing this and that. And people want to do things right the first time. Like, how many of us hate to do something? I was just recently at an airport. You're at an airport and you go on the wrong line, being told to move, it doesn't feel good,
Yeah.
right? You just want to know, where do I go? What do I do? Can we not make that easier for people so that they succeed the first time instead of requiring the correction, and creating that friction that's just unnecessary?
To change directions a little bit, like how is the tech coming along for things like disease identification, heat identification, looking for lameness, predictive things? Because like some of I don't know if any of like the Need app callers and stuff are like using AI in their systems now, but like some of these programs, some of this tech that's on farm now is leaps and bounds way better
Right.
than it was 5 years ago.
Yeah, for sure. I was just down at the World Dairy Expo, and I was at the Need app. They had a small section within that where they gave an overview of their new tech for things like mobility scoring.
Yep.
Um, and they were describing how they do it, what the experience is. Gerard Kramer, who we also work with, he was also talking about his potential, like we get into this place where, yes, the tech succeeds to do this. It finds lameness faster. But the question is that we all have to ask ourselves is, end to end, is it actually improving,
Outcomes.
the animal, is it actually improving the animal health? Do we know it a little faster, but it doesn't really change anything? Does it
Well, you
actually
know it,
improve?
but whether or not you take that cow to the hoof trimming box is a different story.
Right, right. Or so you trim her, but it's not, in the end, it's really the prevention that you need to be focusing on. It's not just so so I think we have to really, as an industry, look at those end-to-end outcomes and not get too swept away by those small wins. Like, always putting it into the context of, if I'm the owner or the manager, is it actually improving my quality of life? Do I have more time to spend with my kids because of this? Um, is it improving our health outcomes? And you can make use of these technologies to do that potentially, but then you need to put them into a bigger program. So for things like some of the body condition scoring or the mobility scoring, if for the mobility scoring, you can say, do you know what? There's a lot of foot trimming that we're doing that actually isn't necessary. Like, we don't need to trim them, mid lactation. Instead, we could avoid that mid lactation trim for, possibly 60% of our animals and focus on the ones that actually have issues that a few, corrective trims could help. Then you're decreasing your foot trimming bill and focusing on the animals, that do have that need. And we know that, when animals do go through the chute, get a foot trim, you do get a bit of a transient milk drop after that. So can you also avoid that too?
Mhm.
So what can we, when we're talking about precision farming, how do we better categorize groups of animals that need more attention or less attention instead of just doing a program across them all? We do want to keep it simple, but, you know, is there a level? You still have to make things as complex as they need to be, but no more complex than that. And if we're able to, put them into two groups, mid-trim group or a not mid-trim group, that starts to get into the realm of saying, okay, we're actually doing things differently that might generate better outcomes for all.
Yeah, it's like this is one of the things that really intrigue me because sure you find it, but if you're not doing the intervention to have a better outcome, what's the point of using the tech?
And I think in veterinary medicine, we ask ourselves a lot of those things. Is doing an exploratory surgery, if you're not going to fix it anyways, is that just causing a bigger bill and more difficulty for the animal? So, asking yourself, and then what is important. But, definitely the computer vision potential is huge in farming because there's a lot of things that are missed because there just aren't a pair of eyes to see what's happening. I think a lot of these techs, the tech out there doing that computer vision element of it, they're good the question is, are they all good enough to be a replacement? If it's catching 80% of the heats, is that good or is that just more noise in your operation? Um, so I think as those get better and better, we're going to get better outcomes. But at the same point in time, in order to get better outcomes, we do need farmers that are open to trying things out, because that's the only way we'll actually get better tech is putting it out there, iterating, making it better, and going on from there. So it's a bit of both, right? Making sure that you're trying things out, that you're aware of things, but maybe not putting all of your money on tech that isn't necessarily going to change the end outcomes.
Well, that's the thing. Like it's not cheap, right? So like producers really have to weigh the benefits of some of these systems that are out there.
Yeah.
And like I look back at heat detection, like the number one cause of breeding issues on farm is heat detection. And at a lot of these places, like you see 30+% preg rates on a lot of farms now. I would say it's more the norm than what it was 5, 8, 10 years ago. And a lot of it is to do with adopting technology with activity, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Yeah, for
and these
sure.
systems keep getting better too. So
And and I think things like, activity monitors are a real success story as well because uh, you know, as a like if we think of what we want farming to look like, we do want to decrease the use of drugs. And if you can
mhm.
decrease the amount of, off syncs you're doing, or I think that's a win for everybody involved, right? So they're definitely helping. But that then changes your whole process. It changes those outcomes. It changes the amount of drug on farm. And so each technology we have to iterate through until we say, yeah, is this really, is this solving a problem that we really need to have solved, or is this kind of just a cool, you know,
Yeah.
interesting things? And when you talk about money, yeah, some things cost a fair bit. But for instance, our system that does, everything from shift scheduling, time clock, all the protocols, AI generation in different languages. It takes data from lots of different sources and puts it into one visualization. I mean, our system costs $2 a day. We're a local Canadian company and we want to put a price point out that's really achievable. So, there's a big variation out there in cost. I think it's just doing that cost benefit for yourself and saying, what does this save me? What does it save me to lose a member of my staff once a year? And, you know, in the training and onboarding and time, I think for anybody's business out there, if you're not providing a 10, at least a 2x return in what people are putting in, then yeah,
You really got to
it's
look
making
at
you
it.
rethink. But ideally, if you're doing that, then what you're putting out there is bringing true value to the people using the tech. And I know when I filmed with Dragon's Den earlier this year, so I made a few phone calls to see like how is this working out for you, and calling out to a farm in Saskatchewan and saying, how much does this save you? And he's like about 2 hours, and I'm like, oh, like 2 hours a month or 2 hours a week, or he's like 2 hours a day. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, I used to walk around with all of my people and point out all the equipment that needed to be fixed and stuff. Now I go around, I take a quick picture of it. It goes in the system with all the descriptions of it. All the information about how to do things is there. And I just put it in the system. And when they have time, they go and they do those tasks one after the other. Now I'm not spending my day walking around with people doing this. They know exactly what to do when they have a bit of time and they can get it done. So, we have to, as a company ourselves, we have to keep on bringing that value to people. And if we don't, then we try again, right? And that's how we've gotten to where we are right now.
Well, it's a really good success story of kind of getting in on that niche area and carving out a piece of it because yeah, like I was pretty intrigued, hence why you're here. When you did the presentation for us because I'm like, well, this is pretty interesting and the sky's the limit almost. It's hard to predict where agriculture in general is going. 10, 15 years ago, like you had no idea where something was going. like the changes that we've seen since then, like it's amazing. So like what are the next 10 or 15 years going to look like?
I think for us, one of the pain points we've really seen is that there's, every technology, every herd management software platform, everybody wants to be the center of the universe, and they don't necessarily want to share their data, if I'm going to be just. And so one of our challenges is just sitting on farm with people, seeing that, yes, now I have an activity monitor. Now I have daily milk weights. Now I have this mobility, but none of this really connects to give me that whole picture. So one of the things we do is we actually bring in all of those data streams. And once you have all that information together, we put the pieces together to give you a full image of what's happening on your dairy. And we just patented the name. You've heard of Copilot, right? The Microsoft
Mhm.
Copilot. So guess what we just patented?
Cow pilot. Am I right?
Yes. So And and so Cowpilot, we have it as a beta right now, but it's really taking that multi-dimensional data from all the different tech you already have and putting it in one overarching place so that you can just type in and say, okay, like what's going on with my mastitis right now? How does this look? And so it's pretty cool to be able to put a plain text question about your specific dairy and get answers back. And so we're really excited about that. We're just like everything else, we iterate through it and try to think of how to make it the most impactful for people. Like, if you sit down to ask a question, what do you need to really, act on that? But it's pretty neat, and we're excited about where that's going.
I'm excited about where this is going because yeah, I think the possibilities are endless with some of the new tech that's coming out and some of the tech that we already have and how can you utilize it? How can you get a better
Yeah.
ROI out of it, right?
Hmm.
When herds say go to an activity system, it's not a couple $100, it's
Yeah.
thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars
Hmm.
in hardware to utilize the software. And how do we how does
Right.
somebody in
Make
my
the most of
position
it.
make the most of it, right?
Right. And I think that's one of our big challenges too, is connecting it to, I feel like nutrition has often not just the way the data is, they've been somewhat disconnected from the rest of the dairy data. And that's definitely something we spend a lot of time thinking about here. Um, but yeah, we also want to be a real success story for Canada. We've been so grateful to receive funding from the federal government, from Kane, from BioEnterprise and OMAFRA. And we have 14 individuals in our team. We're across Canada. A lot of us are in the, Ontario region, living in the same place that the dairy farms, that are local and possibly listening to this content, this podcast are. And, that's the question for ourselves too. In Canada, we've got a great history of being great at tech and being great at agriculture. Like, what an amazing agricultural economy. How do we put our strengths together and really, create some world-class tech out there? There's no reason why we can't do it. And we've been so grateful to the community and all of the, we're often at everything from Canada's Outdoor Farm Show to the different, dairy expos out there. But we are just astounded by the support and the friendliness, the community that we work in. It really keeps us going. And yeah, there's no reason why Canadian ag tech can't be the center of the world.
I will jump off there, Sherry. I truly appreciate you coming on the podcast today. This is a subject that I've been really interested in for, well, a little bit now. And
Mhm.
it's great that you shared some insights and some of your perspective on things. And it was pretty interesting before we jumped on. We were going through that exercise. Like it'll just help me utilize this technology that's already out there better for the producers. So I truly appreciate it.
Well, thanks so much for having me. And yeah, I'm sure the discussion will continue.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. This episode of the Dairy Farmers Digest is brought to you by the dairy team at Wallenstein Feed and Supply Limited. If you enjoyed the show, subscribe and follow us on your favorite podcast player, and please leave us a review. If you would like further information about today's topic, check out the show notes for further details and our contact information. I would also like to extend a special thanks to Christine Schoonerwood, our producer, and our sound engineer, Daniel Noguera.